All right, welcome back everyone. So we're going to pick up here and we're going to talk about how we regulate our fluid balance. So we've talked about basic ideas in terms of fluid and where you can expect to find it and what do you expect to find in the fluid. We talked about types of fluid intake, types of fluid output. We talked about fluid imbalances, right? And so now we can finally talk about how we actually maintain and regulate that fluid balance, right? So we're going to look at blood volume. We're going to talk about things like blood pressure and blood volume, again, and then things like blood osmolarity, right? So when you're talking about regulating fluid balance, you have to talk about fluid intake and output, right? So if we have, we can look at some different scenarios, right? So scenarios we can say, what if fluid intake is less than fluid output, right? So fluid intake is less than output. So we are bringing in less fluid than we are putting out, right? So what is this going to do to your blood pressure, right? What is this going to do to it? If you're bringing in less than you're putting out, then your blood pressure should go down, right? Your blood pressure should go down. Why does your blood pressure go down? Likely because your blood volume is going down as well, right? If you are putting out more than you are bringing in, then what you're going to see is your osmolarity is going to increase if more water is lost than solutes, right? So again, now you have to ask yourself, are you talking about um, true, isotonic loss? So just volume depletion, volume depletion, or are you talking about dehydration, right? If fluid intake is greater than output, right, we're bringing in more fluid than we're putting out. Well, in this case, we're going to have an increase in blood pressure and volume. And if we're bringing in just fluid, right, so say we're bringing in just water, like the case of hypotonic hydration, well, then our blood osmolarity is going to decrease if it's just water or it's more water than solutes, right? If it's balanced, right, if it's isotonic fluid intake, then in that case, blood pressure would go up, blood volume would go up, and the osmolarity would stay more or less the same, right? So you have to clarify and you have to talk about, are you discussing the idea of just fluid coming in or going out, or fluid and solutes, so fluid and electrolytes, right? So with this regulating fluid intake, there's a region in our brain called the thirst center, right? So this is in our hypothalamus. And so what activates the thirst center? Things like low blood volume and blood pressure, increased osmolarity in the blood, and decreased salivary secretions, right? And so for all of these, stimulating the thirst center, these are all kind of a reflection of poor blood volume, right? You have low blood volume. Low blood volume is going to be closely associated with low blood pressure. So in the context of volume and pressure directly, you can talk about the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system, right? That RAS system that we talked about. So renin from the kidney is going to stimulate, angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1, and angiotensin 1 will be converted to angiotensin 2 via ACE, angiotensin converting enzyme, and angiotensin is going to stimulate the thirst center. It's also going to stimulate ADH release. It's going to stimulate aldosterone release, right? All these different things to help bring in or keep more fluid inside the body, right? Increased blood osmolarity. This is a sign of potential dehydration. So if you are dehydrated, what should you do? You should retain more fluid. So the big hormone here is antidiuretic hormone, right? Made in our hypothalamus, stored in our posterior pituitary. And then we can talk about salivary secretions, so sensory input relayed from receptors in the mucous membranes. So, maybe the mucous membranes are dry. This is detected and again stimulates thirst, right? So if these are the stimuli that activate the thirst, right? If these are the stimuli that activate the thirst center, you can also talk about the stimuli that inhibit the thirst center, right? So it's largely the exact opposite, right? So increased blood volume and pressure, decreased blood osmolarity, increased salivary secretions, and you can also talk about what's happening in the gut as well. So stretching as we have more fluid coming into our stomach, presumably because we just consumed additional amounts of fluid, right? So I'm not going to talk through all of these because they're largely the exact opposite of what we talked about with activating the thirst center, right? And then if you want to look at some of the hormones, we've talked about several of these. Angiotensin 2. Again, remember, angiotensinogen is kind of a precursor from the liver, converted to angiotensin 1 via renin, converted to angiotensin 2 via ACE. You have antidiuretic hormone, aldosterone, right? All of these are acting to either increase blood volume and then subsequently increase blood pressure. And then atrial natriuretic peptide, remember that prefix NATRI, that's relating, that has something to do with sodium, right? So natrium is kind of the Latin term for sodium. So in this case, AMP is going to be stimulated to be released when we have excess volume. That excess volume and pressure is going to stretch the atria. The stretching of the atria is going to stimulate the ANP release. ANP release stimulates the excretion of sodium and water in the kidney, and ultimately lower blood volume and lower blood pressure as well. So think of ANP and these three other hormones as being antagonistic, right? These all do one thing, ANP does the exact opposite. Okay, so let's stop here. Please reach out if you have any questions, and I will be happy to answer.